welcome to The Other Side. I'm Dr. Will Miller. Embraced by the Light has been on the bestseller list for 1 year. Millions have been touched by an ordinary woman's moving account of an extraordinary near-death experience. Betty Eadie's book is a revealing and surprising exploration of life beyond death. Now, whether you believe her story or not, it has given many an inspirational and comforting message. Betty Eadie says that when she died, she went into the light and met Jesus. She tells an astonishing story of life beyond death. Welcome, Betty. Congratulations on the success of your book. A very moving story. You died after an operation for a hysterectomy.
Yes, I did. After I had the hysterectomy, it actually was later on that evening that I experienced my death. I died from hemorrhage around 9:30 p.m. and I was alone in the room. I was not attended by doctors or nurses. They'd actually bedded me down for the evening.
So you did not have the story we often hear where someone goes out and then are resuscitated. No one resuscitated you.
No, I was very healthy. I was 31 years old, and they expected me to recover perfectly. And
how did you know you died? Do you remember the moment you died?
I do, very clearly.
What happened?
I felt my body dying, literally, starting from my feet, my hands, creeping up through my body. And it's a feeling that's very distinctive. You know something is extremely wrong. And then there was this tremendous sinking sensation. There was a pop, and then a movement in my chest, and my spirit came up out of my body, at my chest, ran up to the ceiling, and I turned and I looked down, and I could see myself lying there on the bed.
We've heard that kind of experience many times with near-death experiences. Then what happened? Go on.
Well, I came down for a closer look, and I was very, not frightened, but I think I was disturbed for just being alone in the room. And I noticed that there appeared in my room 3 men that were in a soft glow about them. They stood about 2 feet above the floor. And they explained to me that they were my guardian angels, and that they had always been with me throughout all my time here on earth, but also they had known me when I was in heaven before I came to earth.
You've described them in your book as monks. Is that how they appeared, as monks?
They appeared to me like monks. They looked like that, or I'd have to say 3 old men in bathrobes.
And then what happened? You saw a light?
There was a light. And this was sometime later. I actually went home first to see my family. Visiting in my home, I saw my husband and my children. I saw my husband reading the newspaper. My children were preparing for bed. And there was a strange detachment. I felt as though their lives were perfectly fine without me, and that it would be okay for me to go on without them. And then I went back to the hospital, and I was drawn up into this black space by some tremendous amount of force. And while I was in this black space, there were others that occupied this space, going through a transformation much similar to what I was going through. It was very loving, and it was very warm and beautiful, but it was very, very black.
You weren't frightened in that
No,
stage.
I wasn't. I felt a tremendous amount of love there. But then I saw a pinpoint of light, and I was attracted to that light. And I began to move feet first, noting for the first time that my body, I had a spiritual body, and that I had some light in me. It was very dim, but it was glowing. It began to travel towards this brighter light, and that brighter light would be compared to perhaps your sun here on the brightest day, perhaps by another 100,000 times, if you could imagine it. And I just traveled very quickly towards it. As I came to the light, I could see that it was a being, a person, that was emanating this light. The light was flowing from him. And as I got closer, I knew who this man was. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt, just like I would know a grandfather or a grandmother, I knew that he was Jesus Christ. And I began to rush to him. And I said to myself over and over as I was running, I'm home, I'm finally home, and I never ever want to leave you again, almost chastising him for having had to have this separation from him. But he just held his arms out as I ran into them, and he held me, and he loved me unconditionally. And there was a humorous nature about this man.
So you had believed in Jesus before?
Yes, I was raised in the Catholic boarding schools when I was very young, and Protestant as well. So I did believe in Jesus Christ.
When people hear about these experiences, it's hard to convey what the feeling is like. I mean, right now we can all relate to, you're sitting there, we're sitting here,
right.
The way it feels to move around in our body.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe what that movement was like going through this experience?
It was more natural to me than sitting here and talking to you right now, in that when you leave the physical, and you go back to the spiritual, the physical here seems dead. It seems non-existent, slow, heavy. In my book, when I came back into the body, it was heavy and clay-like, and that's how it seems here. It is very dull in comparison.
Now, how did you know that this being was Jesus?
I knew him. I remembered him. It was a recognition. He didn't appear to me with nail prints in his hands or in any of the familiar ways that we are accustomed to seeing here on Earth, such as the pictures. But he appeared to me, they explained to me that he appeared in what would be all his glory.
Now, is it possible that in this state, that because it was part of your background and your belief system, that it would be expected that, say, in your personal case, you would encounter Jesus, and for another person who had a different kind of religious experience, they might encounter the way God would be manifest in their religion? What is your response to that?
Yes. In fact, I asked about that. It was part of my questioning, you might say. I needed to know. And I learned there that if you had another belief system, God would not shock you out of your belief system, but that you would ultimately, we all would come to know that God did exist and that Jesus existed as well. But, that we would all be drawn to that knowledge eventually.
One woman's vision of heaven and an important message for us all.
Well, heaven was absolutely beautiful, Will. One of the things that I thought was very curious, though, was the large looms that were very archaic, very old-looking, and they were weaving material that looked like spun glass or spun sugar. And then I was taken to the most magnificent garden. It was very beautiful, with trees and flowers of all colors, and the grass was very crisp and very cool under my feet. But I noticed that it was as though every blade of grass had intelligence, and it was happy that I was walking on it. I know that sounds very crazy in a way, but it was wonderful. And a flower that I was particularly interested in was a rose, and I was able to enter into that rose by some strange and unusual way, just desiring to be a part of it. I entered in and became a part of it. And as I felt love for this rose, the rose began to expand and literally grew right there with me inside of it. And I learned from that as you love things, they absolutely will grow, not only just physically, but they grow spiritually by that love.
So you come back, and what lesson does that give you as a living person now?
That's what it's all about there. Jesus said to me that our purpose for being here on this earth is to learn to love, and that is one of the most important things. That if we love one another, everything else will be okay.
You really interviewed Jesus, didn't you? You
Yes,
had
I
questions.
did.
Tell us what he told you.
I was so bewildered, I guess, and confused because of the religious training that I had had. I call it a Heinz 57 because I had attended just about every church you could imagine. And here I was experiencing my death, experiencing life, if you will, with Jesus. And I had not been taught these things. And so I wanted to know. And he wanted me to know all the answers. And so as I asked him, he gave me whatever I wanted. He let me tap into what is called pure knowledge. And so I learned many of the laws that govern us here on this earth.
Let's start with the basics. Why are we here?
Why are we here? To learn to love.
How has this changed, Betty?
When I was 31, I was a woman with a great deal of attitude. I was raised in such a fashion to where I had a chip on my shoulder. I had a lot of anger, a lot of I was very judgmental. I judged everyone for whatever purposes. I went through what was called a ripple effect. And this ripple effect was like a life review, showing that what you do to others is going to come back to you. Not only will the pain that you cause them ripple back to its creator, you, but the pain that others create in other people because of what you've done to them, that all comes back.
Now, these are very profound lessons, but you know, life is hard to do.
Not all people are lovable either.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yes, it is hard to love.
So what help do we have?
I learned that we all have guardian angels. As a matter of fact, I had 8. Now, I thought 8. And I thought, am I a particularly tough case? And no, I am not. We all have many guardian angels that are around us, and not constantly they're imposing, but you may have 2 or 3 at one time, and during your deeper, darkest hours, you may have 8 or more. And they do not interfere with your free will, but they try to encourage you to do the right things, and always leading you and directing you towards the right things in your path.
Do you now, in your sort of day in, day out life, have actual spiritual experiences analogous to that, or was this a one-time thing from which you took all of this?
No, when I came back from my experience, I came back with a keener sense of spirituality, and I often tap into pure knowledge, not only about events coming up, but perhaps people as well.
But you don't have visions routinely now?
No, I don't. I did for a while, and to tell you quite frankly, Will, I had to pray that they would stop because they were interfering with my life.
It's hard to live a normal day in and day out life.
Yes, you cannot live in both worlds.
How long were you out of your body, or how long you were dead?
The time was not actually known, but it may have been up to 4 hours.
But they never found that out, did they, Betty? They never knew for sure.
No, because I was left alone.
Okay, you said you were up in heaven. Did you see anybody else? Or was it
Yes, I did. I was greeted by what they explained to me was like a greeting party that meets us all. And many of you, if you've had loved ones that were dying, and they might say, oh, here's Grandma so-and-so, or cousin so-and-so, or uncle so-and-so. This is part of their graduation party or greeting party.
As a parent, I find it would be very hard for me to leave my children. How did you handle that?
You know, I felt the same way because I had 7 children that I deeply loved, and my husband as well. But when I left the hospital and went to see my children and my husband, I wondered why I didn't have that feeling of despair in leaving them. But I could see into each of their lives, and I knew that they were here on earth with their own agenda, and that it would be okay that whatever I was needed for in their lives, had been taken care of. It was done.
I believe in the spiritual realm also, but I'm wondering how you knew that it was Jesus when the scripture says that Satan can come as an angel of light. Did you ask him, are you Jesus, or what was it that led you to believe that he was Jesus?
He knew me. He didn't have to say, are you Betty? He knew who I was. I knew who he was. And the love, the tremendous love that I felt there. Satan is a deceiver and a liar, there's no doubt.
Well, when we return, we're going to meet a man whose life was completely turned around after reading Betty's book. We're back with Betty Eadie, author of the best-selling book, Embraced by the Light. Betty, your book has been an inspiration to many people. I'd like you to meet Captain A.J. Stewart, whose life was changed after speaking with you on the telephone. Welcome. This is the first time you've met, isn't it, today?
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. Well, join us. Have a seat.
I feel like we're kin. After I read the book, I feel very connected.
As happy as this moment is, it comes about as the result of a tragedy. You had a very, very painful loss not very long ago in January.
Yes, I did.
Your granddaughter, who in many ways was really like your daughter, who you have raised, at 16 years old, was killed tragically. Tell us about that. What happened?
Well, my granddaughter and my grandson both 16. I bought her a car, and they went off to school in the morning, and they were a little late getting home, and the sheriff's department came and told me that they'd had a head-on collision with a county dump truck, and they were both dead.
And you bought the car and felt very guilty about that.
Oh, yeah. I bought the car, and I taught her to drive. And I felt then, and still do, feel that it was my fault, and I felt the only thing I could do was to drive down to the gravel pit and eat my pistol. I didn't think that I should keep on living when the kids were dead.
Now, this is coming from a man. You have been a sea captain. You've been in 3 wars. You have seen your share of death and have had tragedy in your life.
Yeah. I've been in 3 wars and typhoons and hurricanes. I've been torpedoed. I've been bombed. And nothing ever devastated me as much as this. It just tore me apart.
Especially your granddaughter was really like your own daughter. You raised her right after your son's divorce. She was like a daughter to you. How close were you to her?
Very close. I was her very own Aunt Pa.
So you're in the midst of this horrible grief, suicidal even, thinking about taking your own life.
Yes, the sheriffs were incredibly kind after the incident, but they searched the house and picked up all my guns, picked up my car keys, and
fearful that you were going to kill yourself.
Yeah, it's a small town, and they still sort of keep an eye on me, and but after I read the book...
When did you read the book?
Well, my psychologist told me about it, and I went out and bought it, and I read the book, and I just had this tremendous feeling of frustration. I just wanted my kids. And I read the book, and I got some peace and some hope from the book. I just felt that maybe they'd gone to a better place, and I just felt more peaceful after I read it. And
can you describe to Betty what it was about the book that was so healing for you?
Well, one of the things that disturbed me the most is my son is a detective, and he investigates these things. And he said that the kids knew for 6.2 seconds that they were going to die. And that was driving me crazy. And in Betty's book, it said that the spirit will leave the body, and that made me feel an awful lot better that they didn't have to go through the trauma of being smashed. The car was smashed flat, and that made me feel a lot better. And then the whole book in general, it just gave me peace, and it gave me hope. And I'm still slightly suicidal, but it's not something I'm going to run right out and do.